And the hurricanes of the 1920s were particularly damaging.
I don't remember a great deal about the original store that washed away in the 1926 hurricane. We were in North Carolina at the time, and Daddy said to Mother, well, now, when you go home, you'll open up the cans, you won't know what we're going to have for dinner tonight. Well, it turned out we didn't find one can. We had a big safe and a hole puncher. It was the only two things that salvaged out of that store. The rest of it went, well, over towards St. James, and people over there, we found out later, had a feast, but we didn't know that at the time.
In the 1930s, much of the nation was mired down in the Great Depression.
During the Depression years, Sanibel was a very quiet place. The ferries were attempting to run, but it was basically just one ferry, and it was a very limited schedule. The number of people shrank dramatically.
During the Depression, you know, that's when I was raised. Times were hard, you know, but we never had a problem of something to eat. We had citrus trees, we had vegetables, we had chickens.
For those who could afford it, a trip to Sanibel Island was a pleasant getaway.
I can remember as a little girl an oyster roast on the beach right out here.
Running down the beach, chasing birds that I could never catch, and also running in front of the waves, which I barely escaped, and just building sandcastles and sitting in the shallow water and splashing myself and people as they walk by.
The 30s also included the arrival of a man who would help ensure protection for Sanibel's unique wildlife by taking matters all the way to Washington.
Ding Darling came to Captiva in 1935. He got with the local people and pushed for establishment of a national wildlife refuge or some type of a state sanctuary. And in 1945, after his attempts finally got in the right areas in Washington, it became the Sanibel National Wildlife Refuge. And then after Ding Darling's death in 1962, the Secretary of the Interior changed the name to the J.N. Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge.
By the 1940s, fascinating people were calling Sanibel home. Esperanza Woodring was one of those people.
Esperanza was my mom. Naturally, I think she's about the greatest lady around. She was born in 1901 and died a few years back at the age of 91. She was a fisher lady, fishing guide, and could throw a cast net probably as good as any gal or anyone I've seen in many, many years.
Except maybe for her husband, Sam Woodring, she's probably the best fisherman that ever been around here.
A tough lady, and she was so tough that she could walk on oyster beds barefooted. Everybody liked her. Everybody knew that she knew more about fishing than half the men did.
A fella come here one time and he started cutting some of her plants in the backyard. And she went out and he gave her a little bit of sass. The next thing he knew, she was walking out the door with a single-barrel 16-gauge shotgun. And the last we seen of him, he was running down the trail.
In 1944, there wasn't much anyone could do to protect the island from the hurricane that was about to come through.
During the 44 hurricane, we had a number of Cuban boats that came into the bay. As soon as they got inside and they realized how bad it was going to be, they wanted to get off the boats, which they did. And the lighthouse folks at the lighthouse at the time took them in and kept them out in the lighthouse when the hurricane was going on. And I think everyone actually went up into the lighthouse not knowing even whether the buildings down there were going to survive or not, which they all did. But they tell me the lighthouse was swaying considerably and they weren't sure it was going to last either. So that was a pretty wild time.
And we had a real bad one then. We had a fish camp in Tarpon Bay that blew away, and I had a one-legged man out there.
And I was sure that he was lost in a storm, because in Esperanza's yard, the next morning after the weather subsided and the water went down, I found his wooden leg in our front yard. And so I walked down the beach looking for the body. Him laying on a little oyster bar that went out, and he was laying there, all cut to pieces, but he was still alive.
After World War II, the island, with a population of about 100 people, began to see more visitors. Others made Sanibel a vacation place or a honeymoon destination.
I was married shortly after the war, and very happy and lucky to be alive. So I came back to Erie and married my childhood sweetheart. And we came to, the first year that we were married, we came that fall to Sanibel to visit with my mother and father. I love this island.
You get the Sanibel sand in your shoes, they say, you know, and you just always come back.
With more people coming to the island, they brought along more children. In the 1940s, an addition was built onto the school, and now Sanibel had classes in a 2-room schoolhouse.
Grades 4 through 8 were in the main room of the school, and each grade occupied one row. The teacher would go from row to row, give us our assignment, hear us recite, and then move on to the next row when we were given studying to do, and when she was at the next row. Things were amazingly quiet and went very, very well.
We had a lot of trouble keeping teachers here. It wasn't easy to live here. We finally got a teacher who liked it well enough to build a house here. She was a risk taker.
In 1952, another hurricane roared through the island. It was the first hurricane experience for many people.
I had never saw a hurricane before. They said that it was going to the water was going to come out of the Gulf. And we went up, and it did come out of the Gulf. And we were standing there looking and seeing that water covered. It was very easy to accept. I was scared. And we stayed, and the guys would carry us from the hotel on their back to get clothes, which it was fun after it was over, but it wasn't fun watching it come.
In the late 50s, Sanibel's long-standing relationship with Cuba was severed.
The Spanish used Cuba as, of course, Havana as their main point coming to Florida. Sanibel's always had a relationship with Cuba, even before the first Spanish arrived here. That did end, of course, with the rise of Castro in 1959.
Jack's Place offered the adults on Sanibel a place to meet, mingle, and have fun during the conservative 50s.
Jack's Place, it was started in somewhere around 1949 or 50, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it was somewhat controversial because nobody else was selling at that time any kind of alcohol on the island, and it hadn't been too long since Prohibition. And it was not very well taken for a while.
People of all races felt a sense of community when Sanibel freely integrated its school.
There were black folks on the island, and they did go to school. They did not go to school with us. They had their own school, which was a couple miles away. But all the kids on the island, as well as the grown-ups, black, white, or whatever, got along pretty doggone good, because back those days you didn't have any choice. Everyone needed everyone at one time or another, and so you made good use of that friendship.
There were no school here when my children started to school, so they were bused into Fort Myers every day for school. And that was all the way from 8 o'clock in the morning. They took the first ferry till the 5:30 ferry in the afternoon, which brought them back to this side at 6 o'clock. And that went on for I guess 3 years. And me and my sister-in-law, Pearl West, went in and testified before the Civil Rights Commission. As a result of that, the next school year is when the Sanibel Elementary School was integrated and our kids started going to school on Sanibel. It wasn't something that we asked for a school, but it was decided that's what really needed to happen for everybody.
Sanibel was a close-knit community. However, some people were ready for a change. Developer Hugo Lindgren had a vision for his Sanibel properties. It included getting more people to the island. And in order to do that, Lindgren promoted a bridge that would end Sanibel's comparative isolation, linking it to the mainland.
It was not something that the islanders wanted. There wasn't anybody from the island at the opening of the causeway except Hugo Lindgren, whose bright idea it was to build it.
When construction on the Sanibel Causeway began, many residents predicted the end of an era on Sanibel and the beginning of another chapter of the Barrier Islands' history. They were correct. Sanibel Island was about to change forever. Thanks for joining me in discovering the untold stories of Sanibel Island.
The Sanibel Lighthouse, a symbol of the past, part of the present, and lighting the way into the future.
It's the center of everything. It's just going across the causeway, anything, it's like coming home.
It is a very significant part of Sanibel history.
After school, we'd go down and climb the lighthouse, and there was a nice area down there. That was a beautiful sight to me when I'd come home and leave from the Army. And you get a heck of a, I never was up in it but once or twice, but you get up there and you get a heck of a view of the island. I think it's 96 feet in the air. That's pretty good height.
One of my earliest memories of Sanibel is being taken down to the lighthouse. And I think we went up in it, which of course you can't do anymore.
It was always a pleasant sight as you came along to the island in the ferry or on the causeway to see the light turning around, and that's quite something.
Well, the lighthouse is certainly a symbol for Sanibel now, and an indicator of the history that's gone before.
I feel a very warm feeling of looking at that light and remembering what it means to me as living on Sanibel.
The Sanibel Lighthouse is still a beacon. I know that when we go across to the mainland and come across after dark, we're always watching for that blink of the Sanibel Lighthouse. It's sort of a welcome home to us.
To order a video of this program, call 1-888-824-0030, and please refer to the episode number on your screen.